Hey, Facebook family, Instagram family, social media family. My name is Danielle Solomon, and the purpose of this video is to give my perspective about what's going on and actually some solutions that I think we should consider as a nation. So, I was on the balcony on my patio talking to my neighbor, and so she's posted a video, expressed her opinions about what's going on. And so she said, we've got to talk about it. We've got to have conversations. She said, we've got to start having conversations. Now, this neighbor, she's a flight attendant, and the airline that she works for, she says that there are about 25% of the staff or the personnel are African American. And so she had been asked to talk about her experiences dealing with racism, so on and so forth. And so she gave her spiel and her things, her opinions. But what resonated with me was when she said, we've got to have the conversations. And she left her door open to have conversations. So that got me to thinking a little bit about my background. For those of you that don't know about me, that don't know me, I was born and raised in Detroit. I migrated to the South. I spent 25 years in Atlanta, and I then moved to Houston for 3 years, and I worked there for a while. I'm a teacher, special ed teacher, master teacher. I coach robotics, teach all kinds of stuff. But I've been a part of programs in the urban settings because I've taught in Atlanta metro area, and I've also taught in Houston's metro area. I grew up in Detroit, so my experience I was educated there. So I've had the experience of 3 different school systems, so to speak, mostly urban settings, psych hospitals, alternative schools, theme schools. I raised 2 gifted students, my children. So my experience goes from bankhead to buckhead, as we say in Atlanta. And I say that to say that I've seen some things that I think could work. So conversations. My neighbor said we've got to have conversations. So her husband and I were having a conversation, and we were talking about, of course, everything that's going on. We know how we feel. We've done the rioting. We've done the marching. In my opinion, our parents, our grandparents, I'm a Generation X, our grandparents, they were a part of the civil rights movement. They broke down the barriers. And so now it's time for the Generation X, which would be my generation. It's time for us to step through and build things, push for a new way. But anyway, so we were having conversations. And so my neighbor and I, he said, well, I think we need to take a look at how we're vetting our officers. I said, okay, that would be a good start of a conversation. And I said, well, not only how we're vetting our officers, but once we get these officers vetted, whatever the process is, say it works, it's fantastic. But once these officers are on the force and they're out on these streets, these men and these women, day in and day out, engaging in trauma on various levels, whether they're handling it properly or not. It's a very stressful job. I'm a teacher, and it's a very stressful job, and I just know that there's a lot placed on service people to over deliver. But what are we doing to cultivate their mental wellness throughout their time on the street. Not talking about after something happens. I have a bonus brother is what I'm going to call him, and he's a police officer, and he tells me the story about when his first murder. It was a father who had murdered his child, and so my bonus brother was a rookie, and he said that when the officer that was over, and I know I may not be calling the ranks correctly, but whoever was in charge, when they came onto the scene, what they wanted to know was, where was his hat? So professional development. I understand that teachers, nurses, I mean, everybody, people, other professions have way more professional development requirements than some of our police officers. So a conversation could be, how are we vetting them? How are we supporting these officers that we're asking to protect and serve us? What are we doing to help support? I'm a special ed teacher. First thing they want to know is, what are you doing to support the environment for the outcome that you desire? So what are we doing as a community, as a department? That's, something, partnerships with the police chiefs. Okay, so vetting, professional development, health and wellness before something happens. So, and then community engagement. Okay, so before I moved to Houston, I lived in Atlanta, and I was education director with the Boys and Girls Clubs of Metro Atlanta. I was a part of a team under Kasim Reed, City of Atlanta. We had a partnership, the City of Atlanta and the Boys and Girls Clubs of Metro Atlanta. So I was selected to be a part of the team, the inner city team. So there were 5 recreation centers that were closed down. The City of Atlanta, under Kasim Reed's leadership, and the Boys and Girls Clubs of Metro Atlanta, we partnership. They opened the centers. The Boys and Girls Clubs provided the management and some other things, but we partner. And so they chose the neighborhoods with the worst numbers. We're just gonna leave it there. So your Ben Hill, your Pittman Park, your Cartersville, Adamsville. So I was in the trenches. So I was over at Ben Hill, and we've got this after school program, and there was a fire station right across the street. So I pranced my tail on over there. They got 3-4 different shifts. They need community service hours. So I worked the deal out with them. They would come over, ready roll, in case they had to run out with the truck, because we're in a recreation center, plenty of room. But they came over, they tutored, they played ball, they mentored, all kinds of stuff. When I've worked at alternative schools, the CAB alternative, I worked there. The police officer there at the time, she was a woman, itty bitty something, can't remember her name right now. But the engagement. So anyway, the short of the long is community engagement. I know Detroit, according to my bonus brother, in Detroit they have some programs where the police officers, each community has their personal police officer. And so they're able to work with the community on getting along with neighbors, and just whatever the needs of that community is. So making that partnership, and as an educator, I just know that kids, when you do it young, they soak it up. They soak it up, and it's a good thing. So we need the conversations. How are we vetting our officers? What type of support are we providing them to make it out here in these here streets? Okay. And community engagement. It's not all on the police officer side. It's not all on the community side. It's a partnership. Those are good conversations to have right now. I also want to tell a story about a little bit about with me, what's been going on during this time of riot. Um, we've had some peaceful protests, and I'm so grateful, but what I do realize is that most people right now are traumatized in their own ways, different levels to it. It comes out in different ways. I think about the police officers. They're people. A lot of them aren't trained. We've never been through this before. Not given any excuses, but we gotta come up with a plan. I know we talk about the punitive ramifications that should come behind this. Some people I've heard, more jail time, strict, holding officers or service people to a higher standard. We need to it's time, we have to talk about it. So I think those are some good things to talk about, having conversations. The story that I wanted to share. So during the past 48 hours, has been just emotionally overwhelming for me. And so I decided to go out to the nature trail, and I said, I got to go out here and meet God. I got to figure out what my part is, because I believe that everybody has a part. I believe it's tied to whatever your purpose is, and we all have a purpose here. Whatever your way, everybody can do something. Okay. I went to the nature reserve. I saw a police officer. This was my first time going to this particular one. I was unsure if it was shaded, where to park. And I was kind of not knowing whether I should, just some fear. For a smidget of fear came over me, but then something else said, be friendly, or, just ask him. Because I'm looking for somebody to ask about the nature trail. And so, the nature trail. And so I stopped, I opened my door, and, I asked him a question. He was really friendly. And so I said, I want to ask you a question. And I told him about my, having conversations. I want to have conversations. And we are having these conversations I'm sharing about my community. He's sharing, I'm talking about, I have family that are officers. Everybody has an uncle, brother, cousin that's an officer. That's a brotherhood. I get it, even if you X out all the bad. And then you have these same officers that have their family and community out in these streets, good and bad. It's stressful. And so we're sharing these stories and what we can do, what our opinions are of what we need to talk about. So this officer, and I can't think of his name, but I'm going to post his picture because he let me take his picture. And after we talked a good while, I felt it was therapeutic. I felt like I had gone to therapy, and it was interesting because he was like, "Oh, I'm so glad you stopped and we talked, and we were able to talk about how some things were when he was young. He was a white officer, about my age. We were able to talk about. I was able to share how my bonus brother told me that he's in the force, but he would let him know straight up, this is how I roll. I'm not covering, I'm not sugarcoating, and if certain shit go down, if you engage in the stuff that's I'm gonna report it. And he said that, he would have officers to be like, oh, so that's how you do, that's how you roll? And he's like, yes. So I shared that story, and the officer in turn, he's like, yeah. They're good cops and bad cops. And he said, I know what your brother is talking about, because when they know you're not about that type of life, they tend to keep it away from you and all that stuff. So we got a chance to talk about that. We got a chance to talk about this particular officer worked in the school system. I'm a teacher. So we got to connect. And I got to, but I asked him at the end, what do you think could be helpful with the stress levels of officers, professional development? How can we make this right? One of the things that he suggested was allowing time on an officer's schedule to work out. Am I saying that right? A workout allowance. So maybe 3 hours a week, and also holding officers to a health and wellness standard. That would be it. This officer also talked about how he's able to separate work from home because he works out. And he, looked to be, I had my workout stuff on and going to clear my mind. He looked like he worked out. But he said he does that, and that keeps him grounded. So maybe that's something that we can talk about. How can we support our officers with something like that? But we gotta do something different. Last story. Same trip, I'm walking up the trail. I see 2 young white girls. I want to have conversations. So I stopped them and we were talking, and I'm asking them, of course, again, we've ridden, we've done this, we know the past 150 years, it's a problem. Okay. But how can what do we want to see? Community, we the people, how do we want to see our officers serve and protect us? What does that look like for us as a community? And how can we support them in being able to achieve that? And so one of the young ladies said, I know it sounds bad. I don't mean any harm, but I feel like I can be truthful. I said, yes, please, we need to have conversations. She says, I feel like when the older people that were basically caught up in all that die off, then we'll be better. And I'm like, but that's how she felt. We're having conversations. We got to have conversations. And then one of the young ladies said, we were talking about how today I brought up that it seemed an awkwardly quiet day where I live. There's, there are whites and blacks. And so it's like, you're coming out the gas station. I'm black, he's white. Just an awkward silence. So the young lady, she was like, yeah, I noticed that, we don't, it's like you don't know what to say, you don't want to say anybody off. And so the other young lady said, but I think if we just smile, that'll break a lot of it up. And I'm like, yeah, let's test it. So we're standing on the trail, people are walking by, all colors. And so we'll smile, we'll take turns smiling. It broke the ice, the awkward silence that was going on. So smile. Let's keep talking. Let's keep talking about how we can come up with solutions. I said one more story, but this is the absolute last story. Tired, been up, didn't sleep last night, but I'm going tonight. Last story. What was my last story? I forgot what my last story was going to be. I don't know. Another video. Good night.